I hope you've had a wonderful day. It's been nice and hot. Not to everybody's liking. I quite like it, but I've been stuck in the office, and that's one of the joys of having to work pretty much full time. But I enjoy it, so uh, there you go. But I hope you've had a good day, whatever you've been doing. So today's topic, I wanted to share with you some of the challenges we faced on one of our construction projects. And all too often, I probably spend too much time sharing with you all the good bits of how things are working well and how much uh, deals we've done or how many deals we've done. But I thought today I'd mix that up, change it a little bit, and share with you some of the challenges because I know people like to see what challenges others are facing and how they've overcome them. So just to give you a very brief synopsis, if you haven't heard of this project before, I call it the London Road Boston project. We bought the property and it was empty for 13 years, a long time. And sometimes people tell me about kind of property being in a bad state. This was in a really bad state. And I've seen a lot of properties in bad states over the last 18 years. This was probably the worst. So we agreed to buy the property and it was in a limited company, so we were buying the shares. Now, one thing that you ought to be aware of, and this is the first thing that I want you to be focused on, is if you're buying the shares of a company which owns property, then one of the first things you want to establish is what is the base cost of that property. And what that simply means, again, to keep it really basic, is if somebody bought a property, let's say 10 years ago, for £200,000 through a limited company. There's been no revaluation and it just stays at £200,000 just to keep the scenario simple. If in 10 years' time, i.e., today, you're buying that property for £400,000, the cost in the company will remain at £200,000. So if in a future date, let's say 2 years from now, you decide to sell the property from the company without doing any work to it for let's say £500,000. So you paid 400 grand for it, you sell it for £500,000, but the cost of the company is £200,000, which is the original base cost. You've made a gain of £300,000. That's the sale proceeds at the time of completion, less the base cost. So therefore, what you're doing is you're paying the tax on the gain from the previous person who sold to you, plus your share. So what you should be doing, and this is important by the way, is when you're having that discussion and negotiation with the seller, you ought to tell them that you're going to take a hit on the base cost. So there's got to be some kind of a negotiation and flexibility in terms of how much you buy the property for. The ideal scenario would be obviously to work out the corporation tax between the £400,000, using my earlier example, and the £200,000, so the 200 grand gain that the seller's making for them to pay the corporation tax. Now, more often than not, they're not going to agree to that because they say to you, well, you're buying the shares, you're only paying half a percent stamp duty on the shares as opposed to whatever you would pay if you just find the property individually. But that saving alone still isn't enough to cover the uplift in the base cost, especially if the property has been owned over a long period of time and there's a significant uplift in the value. So you should negotiate that because if you don't, you buy the property. If you sell the shares at some point in the future, you'll be okay because you'll only pay capital gains tax on the uplift of the value of the shares compared to what you paid and what you're selling the shares for. But if you sell the property as individual units or as a whole, then the base cost becomes quite an important aspect. Now, I know I've run through that pretty quickly. If you have any questions on that, feel free to post them right now. I'll happily answer any questions for you because this is something most people aren't aware of, and unfortunately they don't pick up until after they've completed, and that isn't a good place to be. The second thing that we took us a long time, in fact, this particular deal took us a year to, and that was because we were buying the shares of a company, we had to do detailed due diligence on this company, but also because we were buying an asset, we had to do DD on the property too and on the title. This, in the end, cost us 3 times as much in legal fees as we were quoted at the start because there was warranty, there were indemnities, there was the share purchase agreement, there was everything on property title. Took a long time, there were a lot of questions, you didn't have to go through the accounts to make sure you're comfortable with those. Because once you bought the share in the company, you're responsible for its history. So you need to make sure that the warranties significantly or sufficiently protect you if anything happens in the future. The challenge you've got is the seller may be willing to offer some protection, but for a limited time. So they might say anything that happens in the next 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or 2 years, they'll be responsible for. Anything after, they're not. So for example, if it were limited to the next 2 years, if it were, and HMRC were to carry an inquiry in 4 years' time and go back 6 years, then they'll be covering the period when the previous owner owned the company, and some of the period will be covered for when you own the company. That means you may have to pay extra tax for something that the previous owner may have done, which wasn't in your control. So you need to make sure that the tax warranties sufficiently cover a period with which you're comfortable. But make sure you do detailed due diligence. I can't stress that enough. I've seen so many deals go wrong where the buyer, for example, wanted to save on fees, or they went to somebody who probably wasn't as experienced, because they gave them a lower quotation to do the work. And in the end, they figured out they've got costs to pay which they weren't aware of. The DD hadn't been done, and it cost them a lot more than what they would have paid in probably legal and financial due diligence costs. So make sure you do the DD. I know the 0.5% ST stamp duty is very encouraging and enticing for people, and I understand that, but make sure you weigh up the cost in terms of the DD as well. The third thing, this was a listed building, which meant the council had more interest in what we do to the property. The good thing for us was because it'd been empty for 13 years, the local authority was very keen to see the building come back into use. The previous owners had kept it empty for quite a while and nothing was happening. It was a bit of an eyesore. Some of the local residents weren't happy with it. I assume some of the councillors weren't happy either. So the council was keen to see it being brought back into use. And they had certain restrictions and things you could and could not change. So we had to enter into a negotiation with the council to say, let's work together here. Some of these are onerous and we can't comply with them. It's going to mean we can't carry on the work because the costs are going to be too high. And luckily they took a commercial sensible view that we did a good job. We showed them the plans, the CGI, everything. They were happy with what we were doing with the building, and they compromised on some areas. The biggest cost for us was one of the windows, which went from the second floor down to the first floor, and that cost us with the big long window, oblong window. That cost us £13,000 to replace as part of the listed building consent. So when you are buying listed buildings, you need to be more careful. You need to be aware of exactly what the costs are, what you can change, what you can't change, and things that you are looking to change, what the cost of that will be. If you can't change it, how is that going to affect the overall property and what you're looking to achieve? So you need to tread carefully. There are people who obviously specialise in working in listed buildings and they can support you out of I think 3 now in total. I'm about to do a fourth one, so I wouldn't say I'm a leading expert on listed buildings, but I think I've done enough to know my way around in terms of what to look out for and what to do and what not to do. The fourth one, which has affected us more recently, but this was kind of the back end of COVID, because by the time this project finished, COVID was just about to start. The cost of materials started going up, and you couldn't get hold of some of the materials, so the overall cost went up. Right now, for our project, I emailed on Monday from our cement supplier, and they're saying the cost of cement has gone up by 10% and should go up from the 1st of October. But they've been quite kind and sensible and said, we won't increase your cost if you're already a significant amount of cement. On the 1st of January 2022, cement costs is going up by 10%. That applies to quite a few other products that we're looking to buy. Roof tiles, can't get hold of them for love more money. Bricks, same challenge. Timber frame, same challenge. And it's similar for other products. So make sure you're fully aware of the costings and the materials as you're doing projects right now. That's going to be significant. The fifth one, which was a real kind of a bazooka for us, was trying to refinance the property. So by the time we finished work, COVID just about started. Uh, we had some agreement in place for the funding, and because of COVID, the lender became very, very nervous and apprehensive. They then started asking loads of questions about mortgage repayment holidays, about bounce back loans, changing personal circumstances. They wanted us to sign for a few documents. All of that process added 9 extra months on top of the time we already spent on getting refinanced. Luckily, the rate hadn't changed. They stuck to the rate that they'd agreed, but the finance took a lot longer, and we are not an experienced, obviously. Funding or refinancing takes a lot longer. There's other people in the chain who need to be paid for, who will be able to repay them, or investors. Luckily, I didn't have that issue with my JV partner who was funding this. If we had that issue, we'd have huge problems. So that's something we need to be aware of. So those are some of the kind of issues and challenges we faced in this particular building. The good news is we converted to 21 flats. It's got a very good rent roll, amounting to just under £165,000, £500 less than that. And it's one of our best developments we've done in terms of markup uplift in value of property, plus cash flow created every single month. So although there were some challenges, it is a good deal, and I'm happy to do those deals every single day if I could. I have time and ability. Right now, just share with you, we're building 40 houses in Baker. Again, it's a small village near Boston, and I'll be sharing lots of stuff on that. So watch out for that. But of course, it would be remiss of me to do a Facebook Live a day or so after the announcement from the government about the increase in national insurance. So I'll very briefly cover this for you. Don't get into too much detail about it. Don't get into too much detail about the politics. If you know a bit about me, you'll know I'm involved in local politics as a councillor. So I have a political view on this. I don't usually share too much of my political view on Facebook. Sometimes people do say I should probably share a bit more, so maybe going forward, I will start sharing some of my thoughts with you, just to kind of get your input really and see what you think and open up a dialogue. But 1.25% increase in national insurance from April 2022, that will affect employees, self-employed, and employers going forward. And if you're of state age pension, you don't pay national insurance contributions. Unfortunately, the bad news for you is you'll have to pay this 4.25%. This is also going to affect you if you own shares in a company. So let's say you've got a company where you're the shareholder and a director, so you're on the payroll as an employee and you take dividends. This 1.25% will affect your dividends too. So you'll have to pay more tax depending on what level and type of dividend you take and how much you take out. So this is a kind of a brief synopsis for you. If you're earning the average median income for a basic rate taxpayer, which is just over £24,000, you're going to pay an extra £180 per year. If you earn the median amount for a high rate taxpayer, which is just over £67,000, you're paying an extra £715 per annum. Now, this contribution will be ring-fenced to go towards the NHS and for social care, which is obviously good, because over the last 18 months, the NHS has supported us and the wait lists are very long. So I think, in a way, it's a good idea to fund the NHS to catch up with those wait lists. I personally have members and friends who need operations, but they're not having able to have that operation because of obviously the pandemic. So this will hopefully help speed that up. If you require long-term care, the rules are changing slightly. So if you've got assets worth less than £20,000, the state will fully support you. If your assets are between 20,000 and 100,000, you'll get some support. If the assets are over 100,000, then you'll get no support whatsoever. However, the personal contribution has been capped to £86,000 in your lifetime, and the total amount being generated from this increase in national insurance of 1.25 percentage points is 12 billion per year. So it's a significant amount going to social care and the NHS. Now, just to add a bit of politics to it, without being seen to be critical, one of the biggest and common complaints I get when I'm knocking doors, talking to people about politicians is they say one thing and they do another. That's a major gripe, and you can probably relate to that. And politicians aren't that trusted, I'm afraid, for different reasons. And I guess breaking a key pledge in a manifesto is something which is going to not sit too comfortably with most people. And I'm of the view, once you publish a manifesto and you win based on that manifesto, then you should stick to the pledges you've made. Because people voted for you, and it could be that particular pledge that either got someone to change their mind or got someone to come out and vote who doesn't usually vote, and they could have encouraged other people to vote because of that particular pledge. So I think it's not good practice for politicians to break manifesto pledges. You've got to be clear with the electorate. If you say you're going to do something, you've got to stick to it. And I think it's that type of behaviour which tarnishes the image of politicians. The tax system, generally speaking, as I'm sharing my view now, I think needs a major overhaul. It's complicated. Some of it's very old. It's convoluted, misunderstood, and all of that causes a lot of confusion for people. So at some point, I would like to see the government saying, let's spend some time, effort, energy, and enthusiasm, and a lot of it, by the way, to say how do we simplify the tax system so more people understand it and it's clear. There's so many different reliefs, allowances, exemptions available now. A small change in circumstance means you either qualify for a particular relief or you don't. You need a more level playing field, which makes it very clear, very simple. It's never going to be simple or straightforward, but if the system can be simplified, I think people will be happier because more people will understand what's going on. But that will be a conversation for another Facebook Live at some point in the future, because I've got a lot to say on that particular issue due to my experience in politics and also obviously accountancy and taxation. But for tonight, my time's up. Next week we're doing live with a Q&A. If you've got any questions, you can send them to me through Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, any of the means, or you can email me in advance and I'll cover those questions, or you can join me next Friday, next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. I'll happily cover your questions. If you're on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, search for Shaz Nawaz or your trusted property tax experts and follow all the stuff that we share with you in terms of both taxation, property investing, deal making, deal funding. And if you ever have any questions, I'm more than happy to cover those for you. I hope you have a good evening and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.